Hey, are you hiring? If you answered yes, let XenTegra Staffing help staff your IT people needs. Head over to XenTegra.com/XenTegra Staffing to find out more. XenTegra Staffing, we can staff your IT people needs. Welcome to another edition of the Citrix Session with your hosts, Andy Whiteside and Bill Sutton, your source for all things Citrix.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 61 of the Citrix Session. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Of course, I've got with me Bill Sutton, Director of Services at XenTegra. Bill, you guys are off and running in January or February. Things are happening already, right?
Yeah, January looked really good from a utilization perspective. So yeah, we're keeping everyone busy, but that doesn't mean we don't have availability in the near term to help customers that want to bring their services our way. So things are going well.
Yeah, I think one of the things to highlight is just your kind of limitless bench. One of the reasons we do this podcast is we created this kind of fraternity around Citrix that a lot of people want to work with us and help provide for our customers. They like what we're doing. So that's a big part of the story here at XenTegra. Ben Rogers, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing today, Andy?
Ben, that's going great. How's life as a Citrix SE?
Busy, getting the year started off. I've gotten reassigned to another sales rep out of the Ohio territory, so I'm getting to spread my wings a little bit, getting to concentrate on healthcare. So I'm looking forward to the 2021 year.
That's good. Great to see Citrix taking advantage of your healthcare background.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to concentrate a little more on healthcare than I did in 2020. That industry moves fast.
It does, and it very, very, very much relies on Citrix technologies. It has for a very long time. That's a staple there.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump into today's podcast because I think this brings value to Citrix customers. So I'm excited to talk on the subject and excited for the author of the blog.
And Ben and I were just joking. He just had a situation this week where a customer had a corner use case, and Ben didn't know every detail about it. And that's the life of a sales engineer, right? You gotta be nimble and on the fly, but also willing to say, "Hey, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get back to you."
Yeah, the Citrix portfolio is large, and so to try, I've been here a little over a year, so to try to grasp it in the year I've been here has been a challenge. And then this was a very specific thing about a utility in one of our cloud services, and I just had not seen the problem before. So you're absolutely right. You're constantly catching bullets, dodging bullets, and the ones you have to dodge, which I hope we're going to circle back around one that I kind of fumbled on last podcast that I was in. You just got to go research and get the customer the answer they need and move on.
Yeah. So let's do that. We got Hector Lima kind of waiting in the wings on us, and we want to get to him 100%. Ben, you did have a topic from last week's WebRTC conversation around real-time collaboration type technologies and softwares. There was something you want to clarify that we covered last week, or ask an additional question?
Yeah, I just want to get a little clarification on it. Like I've gone back and done a little bit of research. The topic kind of came out of HDX and our protocol and our ability to channelize, like video and offload video to the endpoint and really build some efficiency around the protocol and how we, how much zeros and ones do we have to transfer back and forth across the line. And then you mentioned WebRTC, and I misunderstood that concept. So I've done a little bit of research on that since you and I last spoke. And I understand the fact that it's at a software layer, and I understand we're doing some API stuff. And I also understand that we're able, like in a voice over IP phone call with WebRTC, we're actually able to, get the channeling from the central server, and then that server will release that so that the clients can do a peer-to-peer. What I'm not so clear about, and I'm hoping you can clarify, and I might be digging into this a little bit too hard, is the WebRTC and HDX. How do those things combine to each other? Or I feel like I'm missing the secret sauce when it comes to that with HDX and the optimization there and the things the WebRTC is going to bring in as far as bringing it at a software level, allowing peer-to-peer communication. Can you kind of draw that picture for me, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I've got a little. I can cheat a little bit because I've got a exposure to something you probably don't have exposure to. Hector, I can see your face. Is WebRTC something that you're knowledgeable of and something you want to address as well when we get to you?
Yeah, maybe a little bit later, but I'd let you go for it, especially if you have it at your fingertips.
So if I screw this up and you know the answer, let me know. So Ben, here's one of my backgrounds in this is using iGel as a endpoint and working with iGel and Zoom in the early days so that you would install the Zoom client on the iGel Linux and it would recognize the iGel session. It would recognize the Citrix session starting a Zoom discussion and it would hijack it using just something that Zoom had developed with iGel for their Linux client. The secret sauce in this, which I think is going to make it all come to fruition for you, is you won't have to rely on Zoom to do that. You won't have to rely on Teams to do that. Citrix is going to provide that WebRTC functionality within the Workspace app. So all of these real-time communication tools will have access to this thing. It'll just work. Like there won't be a Teams optimization and a Zoom optimization. It'll just be optimizations everywhere, and it'll all be based on the power of the Citrix Workspace app and what it can do for the softwares in question. Does that help?
Yeah, it does help. This is exciting, man. This really creates some big efficiencies, especially when you're like in a call center or, think about 911 and trying to digitize and virtualize those environments. This is huge for efficiencies.
I do think it will require the software vendors to be aware of this capability, and they'll have to program to it a little bit, come to it a little bit. But Citrix is going to do most of the heavy lifting. So that last hurdle in end-user experience, which that's why I've got Hector on here in a second, will get closer to being solved until the next hurdle shows up. But that big one around real-time collaboration in a full strategic app or strategic desktop scenario all of a sudden becomes much more solvable no matter where the user's sitting. And I'll thank the pandemic a little bit for that, because a lot of those things that were being worked on got accelerated because we all went home the next day.
For sure.
So guys, we have Hector Lima
awesome.
with Hector. What is your current title? I've been around you for at least a decade, if not more, and you've had a lot of roles at Citrix. What do they currently have you working on?
Yeah, well, first off, Andy and team, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. It's been a long time coming, so I really appreciate it. My title today, I am the Executive Vice President for Customer Experience at Citrix. That's since December 1st was the official date of that.
And that's a new role for you. Obviously, it's kind of a new role in our industry. I've got a friend that I work with here locally that he was a project manager for a building company. Somehow he found himself into some type of office of the CIO here, one of the power companies, and he's very personable and really wants to understand how people are doing and how they're doing their job. And I told him one day at a basketball game, I was like, man, you're an end user guy. You're an end user experience guy. You just got to help create that role within your company, and then you need to go fill it with yourself. That's exactly what you are. So Hector, is that a role you sought out, or is that a role that Citrix sought you for?
I think it's a little bit of both, Andy. I think it came to the realization of kind of leadership here at Citrix that as we transformed to a SaaS company, it was clear that we needed somebody that had a seat at the table that was focused on the customer experience. It's part of the journey, if not all encompassing of the journey, if you will, for the customers. And that had to be kind of a key pillar for Citrix. And then I think for me, I think it was an evolution. Prior to this, I ran customer success, and prior to that, I ran professional services and what have you. And I think these roles have evolved to encompass some of those, customer-centric roles over time. So I think it was a logical fit for us. And then folks on my team ask me all the time, like, well, yesterday we were customer success. Now you're part of this customer experience team. How does that work? And what I tell them is I say customer success is a key pillar of the customer experience, but it's not all encompassing. There's other components that are very necessary to make up the entire customer experience, of which customer success is one of those pillars. Yeah. And then go ahead. You got a question?
Well, I was going to use that example of, you're going from consulting / professional services into customer success into customer experience. Yep. I've got an 18-year-old son going off to college next year, and one of the schools he's looking at, he's going to get accepted under their education program as a teacher, right?
Okay.
Yep. You don't want to be a teacher. He wants to be a consultant. And my wife and I are talking about it last night. And I'm going, you guys don't understand. Good consultants are great teachers. Teachers make great consultants. And I'm encouraging him to follow through with that. I think teaching would be a great teaching. And then, you're learning the technology in parallel. I throw him an Azure book, say, go read this. I think it's a great foundation for, what you found yourself into. And maybe you're just might be the perfect person for what's happened here. That evolution from touching customer projects, managing customer projects, and then the customer overall success portfolio. And then now the end user, you might be the most perfect person for that job ever.
Well, thank you for that. I think I've had a lot of luck in my career, but I'll give you some even more background. So I studied economics. So I'm an econ major. I'm not in technology or even education or anything like that. But I was lucky enough coming out of college. I started working at Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture, and kind of gravitated towards the IT consulting realm. And that's really where I got started. And the reality is a lot of this comes with problem solving. If you're able to problem solve and put the customer first, it will work. In fact, some of the things that Ben was saying in his intro just kind of caught my attention. I remember when I first started at Citrix, we came in through an acquisition. Citrix bought a kind of a boutique consulting company down in South Florida to run consulting for Citrix. The first project that I'm on is out on the West Coast, a startup that was doing some web hosting work. And it was me and another gentleman by the name of Mitch Parker, which, Andy, you may remember Mitch. And I remember after being there a couple of weeks, at one point, the project sponsor turns over to Mitch and says, "Hey, Mitch, I know you don't know what you're talking about, but you solved my problems." And that was the key piece. There's no way that we could know all of Citrix, but he knew that he could solve his issues. So it kind of got me thinking when you were saying you're bringing in the technology. And then me personally, I started as a consultant, became an architect here at Citrix. I always used the 70% rule. If I could answer 70% of the customer questions, I felt I was in good shape. If I dropped below that bar, that's when I got to go hit the books and start learning some other things. So just kind of hit home when you were talking there, Ben.
So Hector, I want to use
I appreciate that, Hector.
I want to use your economics degree real quick. You made a comment a while ago around how important it is in the world of SaaS, software as a service, PaaS, platform as a service, IaaS, cloud is what you're really talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Stuff as a service, how important user experience is. And I think we're going to jump into that when we get into this blog here in a second. But we used to have this beautiful thing, which made our lives easy, where we could sell a bunch of software and it could sit there as shelfware, but we still got paid on it, right? Now that we're a software as a service, if we don't find it getting used, guess what? They're going to stop paying the subscription on whatever part they're not using. The shelfware, beautiful sell of the past is over. We've got to get them using this stuff if we really want long-term sustainability, right?
That's absolutely right. Not only for you to get the renewal, but then you also have to earn the right to grow. And earning that right to grow is making sure that the customer gets value for that initial investment. Now, the good part about that, because here's the thing, we all, you've got, and Andy, obviously, as a business owner, you have to look at the bottom line and the investments that you make, like we all do. So we always look at the front, like it's going to take us more investment to make sure that we provide an excellent customer experience. But the value for us as business owners and leaders is the payoff will be there in the back end. If you make a customer successful, their loyalty with you is going to grow, their expansion opportunities are going to grow. You become very sticky. So I think that the investment is worth it for those that want to take the plunge.
And what you just said is demand, right? All I remember from economics class is supply and demand.
That's right.
You got to generate that demand and keep it coming, right?
That's right. Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Well, your blog that we're going to cover today, the title of it is How to Leverage End User Experience to Plan for Success. I believe this maybe came out sometime in December of 2020. So we're kind of timely, but the thing about this one is it never goes away, right? If you're in the Citrix world, if you're in the EUC world, your goal every day is customer satisfaction, customer experience. Sometimes that means defining the experience, right? So they need to know what to expect not to work. That way they don't come after you with pitchforks when it doesn't work or doesn't work as well as it did on that $5,000 workstation they used to have. So let's jump into that. Your first section here, the topic is End User Experience 101. I think this is going to set the table for the rest of it. You want to help us understand what you're covering here?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we look at the end user experience, we start to identify how important it is for that specific end user to increase their productivity and basically their experience, and how that has a downstream effect on the value that you as a business owner are going to get. So this is just kind of setting the stage, defining what end user experience is about and why we want to focus on it.
Is it fair to say in our industry that because we're now bringing so many benefits, let's say OpEx type of consumption of end user compute and more secure, right? So I made the joke a minute ago about the $5,000 desktop. I had a guy in my office the other day with a $2,000 laptop, and we were talking about end user experience, and I brought up security, and he was talking about, his laptop secure. He's got a username and password. He's got encryption, or anyway. And so I told him to look out the window, and I picked up his laptop and walked out the room. Right? You can only secure so much when it's actually physical and tangible at the endpoint. Is part of this end user experience story helping them understand the benefits that aren't quite as tangible as the ones they're used to experiencing?
So, look, I think that's a great point, and there's a balance there. I think when you're talking specifically to an end user, I think that you can get them to empathize with some of the kind of business, and in this example, some of the security benefits you're trying to bring in. But that cannot be the lead actor, Andy. Like the end user still has to see, well, how is this better for me? And how is this making my life better and increasing my productivity? So we have to balance that, because it's an empathy token, not necessarily the key driver for an end user.
You got to make them. It's got to make it about them, because them is how human beings are wired.
Correct. And look, I think we've maybe using another name. We've talked about end user experience for quite some time. And if you think about Citrix and the way that we sell and provide value to our customers, it tends to be primarily, as the first phase, an IT sell. You're working with an IT administrator or VP of IT or what have you, but it's a technology problem that you're trying to solve. Then Citrix evolved in, well, how do I go now to line of business? How can I solve for a branch, or how can I solve for a power user or work from home? So you start to move to kind of that business line. This, in my opinion, Andy, is kind of the evolution to go to that third step, which is now to the end user. Like, how do I make sure that the experience for that end user that's part of that business line trying to accomplish these IT goals is all tied together?
Yeah, you might have seen me chuckle just now. I scrolled back through the article just now, and the part where we're going to talk about customer interviews and surveys. Man, that's a touchy subject when you bring that up in front of an existing Citrix customer and their admins, and you actually want to go talk to their end users. But we'll get to that one. Hey, Bill, you've been around this a long time. Before we move into other key pieces of the blog, anything about end user experience that you want to share with the group?
Well, one of the things in the article that I thought was really key, which was right at the top, Hector, is you only get one chance to make a first impression. And this, I emphasize this to our consultants, is making sure when we go through the testing phase that they get everything buttoned up the way it should be. Log on times are low, things of that nature, to help make sure that first impression with that first test group of users gets in. They're seeing a pretty good experience, maybe not perfect, but as close to perfect as we can get, because of that reason. That I tell them, if the environment's not where it needs to be and it's not functioning, really well right out of the gate, that's going to be their marker that they're going to evaluate everything else against. And it's hard to get people to move away from that. It's possible, but it makes your job a lot more difficult going forward. Would you agree?
Yeah, agreed. And look, I think a lot of this work at a minimum has to happen in parallel. You can't just go build it, get that, the first set of users up and running, and then say, well, I'm going to go back and figure out, well, how productive was I, or what was that experience? Right. It has to be built into the fabric of what you're designing and what your change management looks like. So we're also preaching that. In fact, and Andy, it's interesting you were talking about your son and education. Part of PS, we also have the education business, and I keep telling the team that the future of education is moving away from kind of the technical enablement to more of that end user change management enablement. Like, why are you doing this? Why is it good for you? Why are we making these changes? So I think education is going to play a key role here.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm going to get to Ben in a second. Ben just came from a customer environment. He's only been at Citrix a year, and he'll have a lot of thoughts on this too. I did have a meeting with a client last week. I get excited when I have a client that used something besides Citrix first, because that's my first sacrificial lamb to throw out there and figure out what we don't know. Okay. The other thing I told the client today is, one, never name your Citrix environment Citrix. Give it a name so that you can replace it with a different name later. Ben's organization has his was Web Connect. But honestly, if this is your first foray into this world, go ahead and plan on the first one to fail. Be prepared to help people understand that it's going to fail, and then we can improve upon that. That's another reason why I like to give it another name, not tied to Citrix, so that we don't get a black eye the first time out. Ben, you probably near and dear to your heart, the whole user experience thing and setting expectations. It hadn't been that long ago you were trying to sell that message to a bunch of executives that I think in the last month or two called you during the pandemic and said thank you, right?
They sure did. I totally agree with Hector. I used to have to work with doctors, and doctors their thing was, you've got so much security around this, you're keeping me from being able to see patients. So functionality and security have to balance each other. You can't get the system so locked down that your users can't do their work. Also, as far as end user experience, trust me, you do not want to be an IT director that goes into the boardroom to learn that your end user experience is poor. I was very fortunate that I was an IT director that worked closely with my techs, and I would walk on the floor and I would actually see, how the users were using it and would give them opportunities to gain feedback. I have been in situations where I've walked into C-level meetings with other administrators and they did not particularly know how the end user experience were, and they found out really quickly. So I'm thrilled that we're developing these packages. I also think Citrix, from a selling point, this is going to differentiate our company from the competition. I have to sit down with a hospital later this week, and my rep's going, we got to sell business value. And I plan on using some of this end user experience kit to sell that value. We're not only looking at how our products are performing in an environment, we're also looking at the best ways and the best paths of getting that technology implemented so it's in the hands of the user. So I applaud all these efforts. I think this is going to be great for Citrix employees talking to customers about Citrix products, but I also think it's going to be great for Citrix customers that are trying to implement these products, and this gives them a path to success.
Yeah, this is great for me. I'm actually having internal conversations, Hector, about taking my CSM team that we recently developed and now turning it into a customer-facing organization that goes out and does surveys and talks to clients and gets some of this feedback proactively. And instead of avoiding the scenario, learning firsthand what's going on. So why don't you cover the end user experience kit from Citrix? This seems like something right down the alley of what we were looking to do here at XenTegra.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll get to the kit and basically the toolbox in a second. I want to expand on what you just mentioned. I think it's critical that end user experience and evaluating end user experience becomes part of the day-to-day activity of a CSM. And the key piece is figuring out when they do it. So there is, as we talked about before, in that planning phase early on, it's very, very important to start that process. Why are we doing this? Who are the end users that we're going to impact? And what does their day look like? Then then there's validation along the way as you start to kind of roll out the technology, what have you. But then if you kind of fast forward down the timeline, when you start looking for expansion opportunities, that is the next time to kind of bring in that experience angle. Like, well, what else are you doing? Where else can we expand the value of our technology and our joint solutions? And you're going to see much more there. So yeah, definitely important for the CSM. And I think there's points in time where it makes a ton of sense. As I look at the user experience kit, we basically put together tools that our partners and our customers can use to start launching their end user experience process, right? So we've got things in there around questionnaires about how you would go about interviewing end users. We also have, actually, let me take a step back. There's three pieces around kind of end user experience that we want to focus on. The first is gathering the information from the customer. So how do you conduct that interview to the end user? Then you want to see how effective you are. So that, in this example for the kit, we talk about surveys, like how do we do pulse surveys and make sure that we're actually meeting the objectives that we laid out for the customer. And then the third phase is, well, how do you measure that productivity? So the kit is intended to basically give our partners, much like yourselves, as well as our customers, kind of that first wave of tools and how-tos to be able to do those three pillars.
This is great. I mean, I was already staring down a 6-figure investment on trying to build this out myself, and this is going to check a lot of boxes for us. Just copying this, using the kit. I mean, I'm not copying. You're telling us.
Yeah, but no, that's the intent. Look, that's my job is to make sure that as much as possible we give the tools and the ability for our partners to be able to do this type of work, because that's the only way we're going to be effective and scale. So by all means, that's great. That's music to my ears that you're going to use it.
Yeah, I would. If this is an opportunity to sign up to be a pilot partner in that, I'm signing up. Let me know.
All right, let's do it. Hey, look, all it takes is to take the right customer, and I think you touched upon this before. You got to pick a customer where the IT and the business partner have an open mind about going to the end user. They cannot see it as an issue for them or something that's going to expose negative things for them. They have to embrace it and see the value of embracing the end user. So if you can pick those types of customers, by all means, I think we should go do something together. And it's actually a fun exercise, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Well, the next section here talks about why end user experience matters. I think we've covered that from an end user perspective, and then most importantly for some of us on this call, from a business perspective, right? Users will tell us if we're there to truly help them. Not only will they help us help them as far as this current scenario, I can tell you all the time, they end up giving you more business, and that's a huge win, and it's a great way to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about that. Where does the value come from, right? Specifically, as we do these kind of end user assessments and using the kits or what have you. So if you look at the blog, we talk about retention of talent, acquisition of new talent, and then optimizing their experience. You can use, guys, any words you want, but basically, let's start with optimization, which really can relate to productivity. That's how you sell it to the business. How can I make sure that our workforce is engaged and as a result is going to be much more productive? So I'll give you some examples. Some of the early end user experience sessions that we did with customers, I tend to want to have the business partner, head of IT, whoever that is, whatever title that is, and the end user all in the same room. The reason that's important is because the aha moment happens across all three pillars. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how many times IT will be stuck on a specific feature or trying to get a work stream working that is very complex. And then when we get in front of the end user, that thing is maybe the fifth or sixth priority for that end user. And you're like, well, why are you wasting your time on that? And you actually uncover other things. Like, you know what? If you solve this problem for me, it would totally make my day. And those are the kind of the moments of brilliance that you're looking for from an end user standpoint.
I can't tell you how many times a project's gotten hung up on application layering. I'm like, guys, it doesn't matter. The customer doesn't care if you layer the apps or not. Just get them out there.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Time to install the image. It's okay.
Yep. It absolutely.
You were kind of shaking your head there. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think as consultants and engineers, to Hector's point, we get wrapped up in the technology. We get wrapped up in trying to solve the problem without really understanding whether it's really a problem to the end user. And to the extent we could get all those parties in the same room and better understand what are the real issues, the meaty issues. Often they're pretty simple to resolve. We just haven't identified them because they haven't bubbled up to the surface yet. And we're focused so much on let's get this feature enabled because it's wow or what have you, that we just get stuck.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to know where you stand, and it's good for business. I'm going to tell a quick joke, funny story here. My kids, my water filter, my refrigerator says it's 67 days past due being changed out. Means absolutely nothing. It's got plenty of life left in it, really. But the fact that on the screen it says how far past due, I get text every day. Go out and buy a new $80 water filter. So eventually, numbers get high enough, I'm going to have to go buy a filter, which is today. I'm getting text on about it. It's good to know where we stand, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yep.
So along that topic, interviews and pulse surveys, I think we've kind of covered this to some detail, but Hector, you want to dig in just a little further on what you guys are doing and teaching partners to do around interviews? And by the way, is this limited to partners, or do you also want customers to be able to conduct their own?
For sure, our customers can do it on their own. So when we make this information available, and these templates available, it's for everyone. So we do have a small practice within my team. It was called around design thinking. So we use a design thinking approach. We've got people that have been certified and have gone to D school, out on the West Coast and what have you, that put this process together. So what you'll see from an end user experience standpoint is how to use those design thinking concepts to start opening the door for those end users, because you got to get them out of their mold too. How many times have you talked to an end user and they're like very quiet? They'll only answer yes and no questions. So the first thing you have to do is kind of start opening them up so they can really tell you about their day. And like I said, we use these design thinking concepts. So the kid will show you and kind of have some examples on how to do that. And then from there, guys, quite frankly, it's going to take a life of its own, because you're going to open doors. And then those doors, you're going to have to figure out, well, how deep and how far down you want to go down that path, whether it's, a lot to do with access, or maybe what the day-to-day activity of those end users are going to be. What are the repetitive steps that they take that, quite frankly, they're annoyed with? And that's where you're going to start to see the pockets of goodness, where a little bit here, a little bit there is going to add a ton of value. Then we gave you some examples of pulse surveys, and it's exactly what the title entails. It's you want to see over time as you roll this out, are you really hitting the mark in some of the things that you uncovered during those end user experience exercises? So again, just kind of gives you simple templates on what you can do, which all of this is customizable. And then last but not least, we talk about measurement. So how do you measure those things within your business? Citrix is very high. We're a very high NPS, both transactional NPS as well as relational NPS. That's kind of our framework to kind of see how we're doing. And we kind of build some of that and talk about some of that in the process as well.
Yeah, I've got a running joke, happy wife, happy life, happy end user, happy consultant.
Absolutely.
And sometimes being happy isn't about necessarily solving all the things you think are important. It's like we've talked about here. It's solving what they think are important. And sometimes it's just a matter of just letting them have a voice. And that goes a really long way too.
Yep.
So Ben, any thoughts on this particular section? So the question that I would have is, when do you start this process? So like for me with sales engineering, being in the pre-sales part of the game here, I could see this being part of my pre-sales toolkit, because again, I'm trying to build value for Citrix outside of just being a technical company and a CVADS company. What differentiates me from my competition? So I'm looking at this very selfishly as now I have a tool that as I talk to customers, I can say, hey, not only are we going to provide you with excellent technology, a platform to do business, but we're going to follow that up with some best practices and actually give you a playbook to get this implemented. Am I thinking about this wrong, or is this more of a post-sale? We've got it done. Now we're introduced CSM. Get the ball, rolling.
Yeah, I got you. So Ben, I'm going to give you the very consulting answer of it depends. But no, the all reality is there's different flavors. So I definitely believe that the end user experience should be part of that pre-sales process. Absolutely. It's going to help you uncover additional opportunities. It's going to help you accelerate those opportunities as well. And it starts to get you sponsorship, or actually we'll start to get the business line or whoever's cutting the check. It allows them to get sponsorship from their end users. So you should introduce those concepts in the pre-sales part of the engagement without a doubt. If I equate it to a movie, I would say you're gonna run the trailer for the movie, which is end user experience, in pre-sales. Give them a taste. Start to get a couple nuggets that you want to take into that process. Then as you get into the onboarding phase, the planning and onboarding, so that first phase of post-sales, that's where I think you start to dig deep. And what you do from an end user experience standpoint, that research has to fit into what you're designing, without a doubt, because if not, you're going to miss it. Then, as I said earlier, then you kind of jump to maybe later on in the process where you start doing validation and expansion work. That's the other place where I think end user experience and really honing in on it is going to make a big difference for you from a sales cycle standpoint.
I think from a partner perspective, we want to introduce the topic at least lightly early on because it's a huge differentiator. I think it's also for Citrix a huge differentiator. I mean, look, sometimes you're competing against products that barely have a functioning protocol of their own. They might be leveraging Microsoft's, adding this type of part of the business partnering, and I use the word partnering specifically there, is an investment that needs to be flushed out, that Citrix and partners are making that investment on behalf of that third leg of the stool, which is the customer partner.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, Andy. And look, go back to your pre-sales motions. Many times you're asking the question, what problem am I trying to solve? And, 9 times out of 10, even 99 out of 100, I guarantee you're probably talking about a technology problem. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you, if we were to take that one step further and say, well, what is the business problem? How do we ensure that we get adoption and buy-in early? It's only going to accelerate your sales cycle. And that's why it's so important to get into that very, very early in the process.
Right. Well, Hector, you summed the article up with a what's next section. What should we expect to be coming out of Citrix to follow along this topic?
Yeah, so great questions. We're doing a bunch of things as it relates to the entire journey. So there's this one aspect around end user experience. I think that you've also, hopefully you've seen some of the collateral that we've put forth around value engineering. So how do you tie kind of the value pillars to some of the things that you're hearing in these conversations? I think those things will continue to grow. And then the last piece, we recently launched what we call the Partner CSM program. And that's, Andy, how can our partners, or how can we help our partners build and enhance their CSM practice? So, much like we do with all of these things, here are all the templates, here are the tools, here's the profile for people that you're looking for to be part of your CSM team. So that's really the next wave for us, which we really introduced at Field Kickoff a couple of weeks ago. We gave a preview to all of you guys at the Partner Council at the end of the year. I think that's the big thing for us here in the first half of the year.
Yeah, just a quick plug for us. We started piloting the CSM program at Citrix a year ago, and so we're investing with our people and our time and our money, and we're already seeing. I'm on probably 3 calls a week myself, where I'm kind of co-leading those calls, and customers really seem to appreciate the engagement, and it leads to business. I mean, we never get off those calls without opportunities to help the customer in additional ways. It's great selling. It's consulting, really, what it is.
It is consulting, and I think we need it because you have to uncover those use cases. As we look at adoption of our technology, if you think specifically to kind of the Citrix motion today, we're being very successful. We identify a new use case. We're going to bring on a new business unit, or there's an M&A or whatever, and we sell to that use case. And then sellers, whether it's our partner sellers, much like yourselves, or our direct sellers, we then pull the kind of TTU, the trade up and transition of your existing install base as part of that, and say, look, why don't we future-proof your investment, and you get all of it together. Once we get into post-sales, though, here's what happens a lot. The customer has only planned for that new use case. That 1%, they really haven't planned on the project to bring their existing estate to kind of the SaaS or modernized world. So having the CSMs start to lay that groundwork, what's the value proposition? Why is it important to kind of bring those items together is only going to help that adoption conversation. And we're seeing that over and over and over again.
Well, and to be fully transparent, that's why we're doing this podcast, is to get that information in front of people and make sure they know that, hey, you're buying this product to solve problem X, but we need you to understand that you can solve a lot more problems with the features that come along with what you just bought. And we're going to do a session next week talking about different virtual app and desktop service options. Every single one of them is justifiable, including the least expensive and the most expensive, because if the customer truly understands what they're getting for their value, it's in there and it's able to solve more challenges. Makes sense. I think we're going to wrap this up. But Bill, any parting questions, comments for Hector?
No, I appreciate you coming on, Hector. This is great information, and I enjoyed reading the article. And I've actually pulled up the end user kit there, and a lot of good content in there that we definitely need to leverage towards helping our customers and end users.
Yep. Hey, Ben, this has probably been good for you. I mean, you may or may not have known Hector before this, but super valuable resource in this part of the business. And I made the comment a minute ago about consulting. I think that exemplifies Hector and his organization through the time I've known him at Citrix. Certainly huge value for you and your customers knowing Hector and what he's working on.
Oh yeah, I've known Hector. Hector, you know Jeremy, my manager. So you've been involved in our group many times. I'm just excited because I've got a good meeting on Thursday with the hospital, and one of the things my rep and I have been working on is how do we bring value. This is not a conversation about just technology. We're having to redefine value and having to redefine Citrix within this organization. And I'm going to bring this to the plate. You know, I'm going to show them how we're working with end users, and we're not only implementing the technology, we're trying to measure the success of it so that both parties are successful, Citrix and our customer in the end, and to be able to measure that and to be able to give our customers comfort that they'll be able to, you know, measure the success and see the success of a Citrix install is exciting to me. So I thank Hector and his group for developing this for us.
Well, Hector, any parting comments before we let you go?
Hey, so first and foremost, Andy, Ben, Bill, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast. Look forward to doing it again. I'll leave you with this because we keep talking about the end user and the importance of the end user. But let's face it, before you can get to the end user, you need the buy-in of the business and IT. And I think as professionals here, we can't lose sight of the fact of how important it is to show them, you know, what's in it for me. And make sure that when you're talking to IT, that by making those end users successful, it makes their jobs a lot easier and makes, you know, them being able to drive their technical requirements much easier for them to do. And for the business, it justifies the investment. And it really does. You want those end users happy using your technology, and you'll be the hero within your organization.
And things like this, you might have already been the hero, but this might allow that exposure of what you've really done for them to get surfaced. And then you can just double down on that once you have that. That cachet in your pocket.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, thanks, Hector, for joining. We'll keep an eye out for your blogs, and if you have others down the road you think would be helpful to talk through, ping us. But I scan them over every week and find the ones I'm interested in, and we bring it to the group and we cover them. It's that simple.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Citrix Session with your hosts, Andy Whiteside and Bill Sutton. A special thanks to our guest for attending today's podcast. Podcast produced by Pete Downing. For any input, or if you'd like to be a part of our podcast, please email us at info@XenTegra.com. Please head over to XenTegra.com/podcast to listen to all podcasts in this series. This podcast is copyrighted by XenTegra LLC.